This video was originally recorded at Menla Retreat and Dewa Spa's Medicine Buddha, Buddha's Inner and Healing Sciences Retreat with Robert Thurman and Eric Rosenbush. To watch more videos from this program, please visit tibethouse.us.
Mark, I love Mark. Mark and I usually do a whole weekend together once a year, and we're just going to do one next year. And anyway, tonight we're going to look at the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And yes. So, shall we start, I guess? Shall we start? Then maybe some more people will trickle in, but there's no point waiting. Now, how many of you have read the Tibetan Book of the Dead in some version or form? 1, 2, 1, 3. Now, Leslie, you probably edited in 3 different versions.
No, not yet.
Huh?
Not yet, but that would be,
Not yet?
that would be a great start.
Yeah, well, my version I did with Bantam, so you didn't get a chance to ask that. But first of all, the Book of the Dead is not the Book of the Dead. It's called the Book of Liberation by learning, I like to say by learning in the between. When learned, or you can even say when learned in the between. And one of my favorite things about translate, one of the reasons I accepted to retranslate it is that I don't like calling this death, rebirth, transition period the intermediate state. I hate that. When the Tibetan word Bardo means in between. So it's between, and it can fit, that's great in American culture, when you begin, the between. It's a 2-syllable word, and it's correct, you know, it's the between. Sure, yeah. And people want that, so when you say intermediate state, people end up saying Bardo, which is the Tibetan word. But why not use the word the between? That was one of my great joys in translating this book, was to translate it as the between. And so it's Bardo Tejul, and Bardo means in the between, and Te means to listen, literally, or to hear, but the hearing is the word for learning, because they didn't have so many printed books in those days. So you hear something to learn instead of reading it. So Teva really means to learn. When you say someone is very erudite, you say Teva Chimbo, has great learning. And so it's a book of natural liberation, meaning that liberated by nature. And why? What is the nature that liberates you? This is the Buddha vision, you know, which people wrongly think Buddha's vision is that everything is suffering. But Buddha's vision actually is that everything is not suffering. That's superb. As the Dalai Lama says, if the Buddha's vision and teaching was only that there's all this inescapable suffering everywhere, for him to teach at all even would be like going, as he said, like going to a person whose life in prison and going, nya, nya. You're going to suffer, nya, nya. That would be it. The only reason he mentioned the suffering part was to inspire people to find the bliss part. In other words, in comparison with reality, which is nirvana, they're living in an unreal world based on delusion, is suffering, right? And so what he said was not even, you know, the poor Pope, 2 popes ago, he wrote this book called Threshold of Hope, in English. The translation was Threshold of Hope, but the chapter on non-Christian religions was written by Cardinal Ratzinger, who was then the next Pope, right? The just recent one. And he wrote in there like, oh, I can't see how anybody could ever deal with Buddhism. It's so, they must be so miserable when they're just told everything is suffering. Meanwhile, he was having a jolly time in the Vatican. So he thought Christians were all happy. So that's fine. But anyway, the main point is Buddha's vision is that that the reality is bliss, it is nirvana. That's what reality is. Unreality is suffering. When you're trapped in an unreality, you suffer. Okay, so natural liberation means that if you get to nature, then you'll be liberated. You know, if you let nature happen, if you don't distort nature with some sort of concept, some sort of distorted and erroneous concept. And therefore, the most amazing thing in the Book of the Dead, for example, where it begins really, well, there's some prayers and stuff which we could look at, but where it begins, and that's where I just want to begin with this tonight. Hey, noble one, you named so-and-so, you know, whatever the name of the departed person who's just at the point of death. Now the time has come for you to seek the way. Just as your breath stops, the objective clear light of the first between will dawn, as previously described to you by your teacher. Your outer breath stops, and you experience reality, stark and void-like space. Your immaculate naked awareness dawning clear and void without horizon or center. At that instant, you yourself must recognize it as yourself. You must stay with that experience. I will describe it again to you at that moment. So this is the challenge, you know, the clear light. In other words, nature, what is the deepest nature of reality is voidness. But voidness is not nothingness. Voidness is the infinite web of relativity of all things. And it is made of, however, the deepest, subtlest level of that energy is called the clear light of the void, or the transparency of the void, the pravasvara. And that pravasvara, that clear light, is really not, it is a grayish transparency, you know, like a diamond. It's not a white light. There's another level in the subtle body mind that is the white light. We already meditated. Actually, how many of you when we meditated through the 8 dissolutions before? How many of you were here? Only 3 or 4 of you. So some of you are newly here. I see, and we're not there for meditating on that. Oh, I see. So maybe we should do that. But wait, this will come. You will meditate on this, okay? This will come. So the point is, when you have an experience, for example, well, even if you were wide awake and feeling energetic and you suddenly passed out, like what you do when you fall asleep, you would be upset. You would think you fainted, you lost consciousness, you would be very, very upset. Because the idea of your consciousness not being in what the Buddhists would call your coarse senses, looking at your ordinary environment, and having a feeling of control, like recognizing you're in this room, and your eyes are functioning, and you're interpreting what you see with your brain, and recognizing ceiling, light, floor, wall, table, people, etc. You're used to, that's where you feel like you're in control, you're in a space that you can deal with it. I mean, sometimes it's uncomfortable, but usually that's it. So when you just completely black out, or you lose yourself in a vast space, you would feel freaked out, like, where am I? What am I doing here? You know, right? But at night, you do that every single night, and you do it with relief and joy. You close all the doors and windows that are in the city, you lock the door, you turn off all the lights, you quiet the sounds down, you go like this, in the nice pillow, you cuddle up in the covers, and you lose consciousness, happily, right? And in a way, in that unconscious state, your sense of boundary between your skin and what's outside it is disappeared. And you're just completely oblivious to what's going on around you. So you can identify with yourself in the state of sleep. You don't do it once you've already fallen asleep, but at the boundary when you know you're going to lose consciousness, you're fine with it, right? Although sometimes some people freak out, and you know, if you don't sleep for 17 to 20 days, you die. Which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, and you go pretty crazy a few days before.
Yeah, you do. I know one really neurotic French painter who almost, I think he made it 26 days. And they had ambulances, and they were doing all this stuff trying to get him to go to sleep, and they gave him sleeping pills. He was so freaked out, but finally someone brought him some wine from the home country of Burgundy, and he drank that and he passed out. Luckily. Very nervous guy. Edith Bervachon, I still remember, a very nice, a good friend of mine. I mean, he didn't do that when I was there, but I mean, it doesn't happen to me. So the death thing is like that, but then in the death thing, what they're encouraging and the real nature of things is not that dark space in which you fall asleep. That's called the state of immanence. That's the threshold state of a state which is a state of this gray brilliance. But a gray brilliance, that is a kind of brilliance that combines the brilliance of blackness and whiteness. So there's no shadow. Everything is self-illuminated. Everything is transparent. And it's made of light. So in a way, it's not a bright light shining on a non-bright object, like ordinary sunlight or moonlight or electric light. Everything is light. So it's all transparent. Something like that. It's pure light energy. It's at that threshold of where mass, the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second in materialist physics, Einsteinian physics, and because you can't go faster than that, the light particle, because mass becomes infinite at that state. And so that's the event horizon of the clear light of the void, is exactly that area, in that kind of realm. Where wave, particle, you can't tell, wave function, whatever it is. That's where the quantum people said you couldn't say what deep reality is. It's this deep, infinite energy of the vacuum. I mean, I don't know. Never mind. We'll get into it. But the point is, you experience that at death, and they're saying to you, recognize it like you know what it is. And now meditate. Now the next thing I'm going to read, do it meditatively. Try to meditate this now. Okay, go into meditative mode. Now imagine in meditative mode that you lose your sense of visual consciousness. That whatever you're seeing, or even imagining as seen, is constantly eluding your ability to recognize it. Which is so therefore it's like a mirage or a hallucination. Which is your visual cortex desperate effort to recognize what is in your visual sensory apparatus, and failing to do so, and then you lose your sense of sight. You become blinded. By your ordinary eyes become blinded. And then that is called earth melting into water, and your body, the sense of solidity of your body, feels like lost, and you feel fluid. You feel like you're melted into fluidity. And the sign, you have an inner visionary sign of a hallucination, like one of those patterns, like one of those Muslim patterns in their temples, some kind of drug hallucination. It's like that. Okay, then you have this second sign is where you feel like there's billowing smoke all around you, and a little bit feeling of heat, and internally, and you lose your sense, and you have a roaring sound in your ears, and you lose your sense of hearing, and you feel like you are a smoky space. It isn't like you're looking out of your body. Your body has become, your sense of motor movement has diminished, and you're feeling like almost paralyzed or something. And your visual whole operation is stopped, audio operation stops, and you feel like you're sort of in a smoke-filled place. You are a smoke-filled place. And that's water melting into fire. And then you start cooling off, and you have an inner sign of like a lot of flickering fireflies, or like a moire pattern of raindrops falling on a pond surface with interlacing ripples. And that is fire melting into wind. And by that time, you lose all motor. You are like, it's like your whole body has gone to sleep, like some limb will go to sleep when you sit on it in an uncomfortable way. Now your whole body has gone to sleep, and you have no way of moving anything. You become like paralyzed. And then your wind element finally goes, and you go into pure space. You are a pure space. And the inner sign of that is there's this single candle flame, like very, very still candle flame. A light like a candle flame light is, but everything you have is feeling that that's what the universe is, that you have become that. It's not like you see that in front of you. And then, from that you go into a state called luminance, of white, moonlit, empty sky. And again, you're not lying in it in a boundary body with skin and everything, you know, with the skin marking the limit of your physical being. You physically are just this white space, white lit space. That's all you are. And you kind of can be afraid at that time, and you feel you've lost something. You know, if you're not prepared for this, you could be kind of scrambling to try to feel like you had a body that was defined you versus the space that you were in. And the fact that you were pure space would be like you were losing yourself in that pure space. You'd feel very freaked out if you haven't prepared. That you say, I am the space, you know. But you don't say it at that time. You no longer maybe have an I am going, except very subliminally. But you identify with that's you. That's you. Your awareness is you. This then becomes, as your awareness expands within that space, it seems to heat up, and it turns into an orange space called radiance, a reddish-orange space like a sunlit space. And then you go deeper than that, because that's kind of hot and burning, sunlight, brilliant, bright light, you know, it's a little bit dazzling, and you then, looming up is a black space, dark space, total darkness, which you move toward sort of inexorably, and you are a vast black space. And again, you don't feel you're losing yourself in the black space, you just are that black space. And at a certain point in that black space, you kind of succumb to it, and you let your consciousness go, like when you fall asleep. Then what happens is clear light. That you become conscious of yourself in that black space, but it gives way to a grayish pre-dawn sky lit space of infinite transparency. And you then, in a way, expand into it, but of course you don't have a motive and a goal, because you're not an individuated thing in a way, and you're not an individuated point in it. You are the whole thing. And so there you don't really need to expand because you're instantly infinite. And then this is pre-dawn twilight sky is the sign of immanence dissolving into clear light. So now I will read this. Now stay meditating and imagine that you've just died and you are just this clear light space. You're going to be imagining that you're conscious of it. Actually, usually the normal person crawls right past it, because they're so desperate to reassert their sense of being something separate from everything else, that they have that so much that habit, that they don't stop and immerse themselves in this infinite energy, clear light. But then you give the instruction, you say, hey, noble one, now you have arrived at so-called death. So you should conduct yourself according to your conception of the spirit of enlightenment. That means you should conceive your spirit of enlightenment thus. Alas, I have arrived at the time of death. From now, relying on this death, I will develop my spirit only by contemplating the conception of the spirit of enlightenment, of love and compassion for all beings. For the sake of the whole space full of beings, I must attain perfect Buddhahood. And especially you should think, now for the sake of all beings, I will recognize the death clear light as the body of truth. That's the body of all Buddhas, the reality body of all Buddhas. You could say the reality body. Within its experience. So you identify with this infinity in a way, with this vastness. You are that. I am that. Within its experience, I will attain the supreme accomplishment of the Great Seal. And the Great Seal is means like a seal, like sealing wax. You make a stamp of a seal. But here the Great Seal, or Universal Seal, is the seal of the body of truth on all seemingly differentiated things. So it's the embrace of all these things within the clear light of the void is what the Great Seal really is. And I will accomplish the purposes, I will attain the supreme accomplishment of the Great Seal, and I will accomplish the purposes of all beings. You can accomplish the purpose of all beings because you perceive yourself as being all the beings and all the environments of all the beings. And you experience that as total bliss, because when you are embraced by the infinite clear light, you feel nothing but bliss. The only way you do it is by melting your individuated self into this great bliss, into this clear light. And therefore you can manifest and shape that infinite energy any way that beings require. So you feel another being, for example, and they are floating, and you see them as just made of the same great bliss, clear light, great bliss as you, and as an infinite world, but you see that they are writhing in pain within that, because they are trying to ward off this energy and remain intact as a separate being inside that, in some sense struggling against it, because that's how they think the reality is, and they feel the flood of energy of the Great Seal is somehow an invasion, and they're frightened of it, and therefore they tense themselves and close themselves against it. And so you can shape that energy around them in whatever way that they will perceive it as a doorway into releasing their defense and embracing this bliss reality. Whether that doorway for them is another person talking to them, whether it's a book, whether it's a picture, whether it's a planet, whether it's an animal, whether it's a tree, whether it's a continent, whether it's an ocean, whatever it is, you can shape that infinite energy into whatever will be most beneficial for them to perceive. So that's why, by attaining the supreme accomplishment of the Great Seal, I will accomplish the purposes of all beings. If I don't attain that, then in the time of the between, I will recognize it as the between. That is to say, I will between lucidly. I will lucidly do the between. Like lucidly dream, I will lucidly between. I will realize that between as the Great Seal body of integration, and I will accomplish the purposes of all the infinite space full of beings by manifesting whatsoever is needed to tame whosoever. Thus, never losing the willpower of that spiritual conception, you should remember the experience of whatever instructions you have previously practiced. So this is being one with the clear light. And then it elaborates it even more thoroughly. Hey, noble one, you named, put in your own name or name of anyone departed. Listen up. Now the pure, clear light of reality dawns for you. Recognize it. Hey, noble one, this your present conscious, natural, clear, void awareness. This presence in clear voidness without any objectivity of substance, sign, or color. Just this is the reality, the mother, Buddha all-around goodness. And this, so the mother, the objective side of it, is the mother, Buddha all-around goodness. Mark really loves that one. And this, your conscious awareness, natural voidness, not succumbing to a false annihilative voidness, just your own conscious awareness, unceasing, bright, distinct, and vibrant. Just this awareness, which is bliss, they don't say bliss, but because this is for the common populace, but this is a bliss awareness, is the Father, Buddha all-around goodness. Just this presence of the indivisibility of your awareness as naturally insubstantial voidness and the vibrant, bright presence of your conscious awareness, just this is the Buddha body of truth. Your awareness thus abides in this vast mass of light, of clarity, void, indivisible. You are free of birth or death. Just this is the Buddha changeless light. It is enough just to recognize this, recognizing this as your own conscious awareness's purity, nature as the Buddha, yourself beholding your own awareness. That is to dwell in the inner realization of all Buddhas. So they don't say, but at that point, if you are prepared for that and you recognize that, you realize that you and all the Buddha's minds that ever were are all one, and you feel that you are one with all the minds of all other non-Buddha beings as well. And the Buddhas you don't worry about because they are equally with you in the bliss perception of it. But the non-Buddha ones, you feel they are you, and yet you realize that they subjectively don't know that they are you. And so your energy naturally flows around them, seeking a way to introduce them to being one with this clear light themselves, sort of thing. So, in this, when you meditate, and there are various ways of doing this. What's called Dzogchen in the Nyingma tradition, and this particular book of the Dead, version of the Book of the Dead is from the Nyingma tradition. And there they go into a thing where you meditate and you somehow let go of your sense of separation from everything around you. Your eyes are partially closed, so you just have a notion of everything that's around you. But you feel totally interpenetrating with that thing around you as a vast space. So you kind of directly feel one with this space. And you don't feel, it's not like you're sitting there thinking, oh, here's this space around me. You don't think anything. You could, like when you do some vipassana and you count your breathing, and then when you have a distracting thought, you bring it back to the breathing. Well, here, you let yourself be space, vast space. And when a thought arises like, oh, what is this? I'm trying to imagine I'm space, that's silly, blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is, you then get away from that thought, you let go of that thought, and you come back to just being space. Or there are different ways, or you can let the thought itself be space. But in a way you ignore it. You have to ignore it as a separated thing, emanating from a separated person who's thinking about their condition. You have to stop your discursive thinking. It's very difficult to do, of course, but then at first you do it and then you bring your mind back to just being space. If you can do that, that's a very, of course, powerful way, but usually there's all kind of preliminary steps of where you look for yourself as a set point of separation from things really, really hard. And when you really do that, looking with your own hardest subjectivity for yourself in your hardest objectivity, for your real identity inside in its hardest objectivity, and you press the subjectivity against the objectivity with all your might, your mental concentrating might. And when you do that, that melts the stress of that, the deep core mental stress of that causes you to melt into that spacious thing. So that's the harder way to do it. But in a way, maybe more practical for most people. Because you can fool yourself into thinking, oh, I'm just space, and then not think anything. But you haven't actually excavated this subliminal feeling of being a certain separate point of existence, opposed to the whole space and the universe, like a located in the space. Your subjectivity, in other words. Not that easy to suspend it, let's say. But anyway, this is the training, and for a moment, every being that dies, even the most ignorant one, even animal, even Preta realm, hell realm, deity realm, any being, the death is defined as when that being their consciousness withdraws from the coarse elements and then goes down through the three subtle states of moonlit, sunlit, and darklit space, and then hits clear light. And when it hits clear light, the mind, body, and this, at that point the body is very, very subtle. It's just a pure, it's like a dream body of pure energy. And the body-mind goes into clear light. Everyone does that. But no unenlightened person takes time or has preparation to be able to recognize themselves as vast space. Because they only can recognize themselves as some separate thing that is in an environment with a boundary between self and the other. So then what the between is where, shooting past this clear light, the ordinary being, they then crawl up the ladder of darklit, sunlit, moonlit, and then consciousness, and then wind, fire, water, earth, and then some kind of body they seek, either in a womb, in an egg, in moisture, or spontaneously. They seek some kind of individual, separated embodiment. And then this process is described in the Book of the Dead. But they seek it because they're used to being like that, and they feel too insecure just being a vast. They don't know what they are, they don't identify with themselves, they're not prepared to identify with themselves as the infinite, loving, benevolent, loving in the sense that energy is loving in the sense that it has infinite energy. So whatever energy is required for satisfaction by any entity that is made of it, is part of it, is available to that entity. So there can be no deprivation, there can be no lack, there can be no need, there can be no loss. Every being has plenum of energy in its very atoms, in a way. In a way, it's very scientific. You realize the whole planet Earth, this planet Earth, except for maybe some really isolated and incredibly uninformed people in some remote areas, everyone on planet Earth has had a subliminal teaching of the illusoriness of the apparently solid reality, solid material objects, by the nuclear explosions, nuclear fission. Because of the atomic bomb, actually, everybody has realized that every atom has this infinite energy inside it that can completely vaporize any kind of solidity. It's just a subliminal message to the planet Earth, actually. And that means that your own cells, and this is why you have where miracle healings come from, by the way, and where even miracles come from. That means that that energy in every so-called atom in your body, and of course there isn't really a real atom, in a sense that there's a relative level of structure you could call an atom, but by quantum people have proved that even its components are dissolved under analysis and the whole thing disappears if you keep analyzing it. So it isn't like a fixed, indivisible thing that is the sort of bedrock of physical reality. There's no such thing. But nevertheless, you know, we feel sort of solid, like my elbows banging on the arm of the chair and so forth. But that means that the energy in my cells, if directed to release in some more friendly way than nuclear fission, which wouldn't do much good to me, but to release in some other way, there is a plenum of energy in every cell of my body to fulfill any need of any kind, to be strong enough to eliminate any alien presence or thing that was obstructing my organs or any such thing. There's this infinite energy in the body, because we are made of this clear light, which is this infinite energy. In enlightened vision, in a realistic vision, and that is enlightened vision. Unrealistic vision, you know, I have like a tumor in my arm, and it's like whatever, melanoma, and I don't know what. And then, you know, and I feel so weak and depleted and exhausted and whatever, and I just collapse. But this is just because I'm caught in that story, really, in that level of reality, which even our own scientists tell us is illusory. Because atoms are mostly empty, there's some sort of buzzing thing, not some sort of skin, a solid skin. Anyway, so it isn't really that they necessarily expect an ordinary person who hasn't trained in life to be able to recognize this. There's the mantra that is foundational in all Tantra practice, for example, which is really marvelous. Actually, repeat after me. Om.
Om.
Shunyata.
Shunyata.
Jnana.
Jnana.
Vajra.
Vajra.
Swabhava.
Swabhava.
Atmako.
Atmako.
Hum.
Hum.
That's a really great mantra. Okay, let's do it again. Om Shunyata Jnana.
Om Shunyata Jnana.
Vajra Swabhava.
Vajra Swabhava.
Atmako Hum.
Atmako Hum.
Om Shunyata Jnana.
Om Shunyata Jnana.
Vajra Swabhava.
Vajra Swabhava.
Atmako Hum.
Atmako Hum.
Om Shunyata Jnana. Vajra Swabhava.
Om Shunyata Jnana. Vajra Swabhava.
Atmako Hum.
Atmako Hum.
Om Shunyata Jnana Vajra Swabhava Atmako Hum.
Om Shunyata Jnana Vajra Swabhava Atmako Hum.
Om, so good. That's just a good omen. But what the Shunyata, you know, is voidness, emptiness. Om is Om, right? Om means The A is the body of all Buddhas, U is the mind of the speech of all Buddhas, and is the mind of all Buddhas. So Om celebrates the fact that we are enfolded in the body, speech, and mind of all Buddhas infinitely, forever, and have always have been, actually. So that's Om. Then Shunyata is emptiness. Jnana means intuitive knowledge, meaning unmediated, direct, non-conceptual knowledge. So that means the intuition of emptiness. Shunyata Jnana, right? Then Vajra is this word that can mean diamond, it can mean thunderbolt, it can mean clear light, but it is what it is clear light. It's the Vajra, and it meant thunderbolt in the Vedas, but in Buddhism it means the omnipotent power of love in the universe, Vajra. Like a diamond, you know, nothing, it's harder than any other thing. So diamond is almost, it's kind of an analogy. Or a thunderbolt, it's like a powerful energy. So Om Shunyata Jnana Vajra, so that means the knowledge of emptiness, the direct knowledge of emptiness, is a Vajra, right? You got it? And then Swabhava means nature. So the nature of the diamond, of the intuition of emptiness, Atma Koham, that is my personal nature. Atmako Aham. Aham means I. And Atmako means, again, like personal nature, soul nature. And Swabhava means sort of more general nature. So that means that's asserting one's identification of oneself with the infinite clear light of the body of reality of all Buddhas. That is myself, in other words. And that is considered true because Buddhas have a more realistic vision than ignorant people like me, and Buddha perceives himself as one with me in that nature. And it's just my bad habit of thinking I'm something different that makes me suffer and feel depleted. Where would I go? Where's mom? You know, if I'm being shrunk, you know, where's my mom? Why didn't she pay attention? Now so Bruce, right? Why didn't mother come and kiss me goodnight? Right? Remember? It's so brilliant, actually. That where is he? Is he still here? There he is. There's David. And so in a way, although one is saying this mantra to imagine, to rehearse for this moment that every being has every time they die, and actually they say every time we fall asleep we have this. That's why we have the Menla sleeping yoga, being one with the clear light, because that's where we lie when we sleep. We feel we're unconscious because we don't recognize that. We just say unconscious, because we don't recognize that beneath that unconsciousness, if we had a more stabilized mind and more subtle, more ability to be a subtle subjectivity, we would be consciously unconscious. And then we would realize this transparency, diamond, brilliant, transparency of clear light. Buddha changeless light, even when we slept. But there was a Lama, Nyingma Lama, head of Nyingma order actually. Minling Rinpoche.
Minling Rinpoche, yeah.
And his whole thing as the head of the Nyingma order, and he escaped in exile, lived in India, he passed away, I believe, recently. Yeah. But his whole thing was sleeping all the time. You'd go and meet him. I met him. He woke up a little bit and chatted with me. But then he was mostly sleeping.
Yeah, sure.
When I arrived, they said, well, you might not be able to see him because he's sleeping, but you can go and sit there while he sleeps. And he, like, oh, hey, how you doing? He was there. And then there is one of the Mahasiddhas was slept his way to Buddhahood, actually. He got to be Buddha by sleeping. From mixing the clear light of sleep with the clear light of death, with the clear light of Buddhahood, those three clear lights. Those three opportunities of realizing clear light. Sleep, death, and Buddhahood, those are the three. So we've died infinite times, all of us. We've all been in the clear light. For a split second, but we just rushed past it. We weren't in that moment enough that they're trying to teach here in Book of the Dead. But I could tell you the story of the guy who slept his way to Buddhahood, but I don't want to distract you. But maybe it's fun. You want to hear that story?
Yes.
So that guy, do you remember that story? Do you know him? I think his name was Khadgapa. But I forgot. Names are just terrible at my age. But anyway, Nagarjuna was traveling somewhere in India, and he came to this village. And outside the village was the charnel ground, you know, the burning ground, smashana they call it. Wonderful Sanskrit word, smashana, in case you get smashed, where they throw the corpses. And there was a guy, a well-dressed guy, kind of plump, well cared for, lying there weeping. And Nagarjuna said, what are you doing here in the smashana, weeping? And you look healthy and cheerful. What's that? You should be cheerful. Why are you sitting weeping? He said, well, problem is, he said, I only like to sleep. That's all I like to do. And I have a wife and a mother and etc. and a family, but they're tired of taking care of me and feeding me while I sleep. So they finally got fed up. And they said, if you're going to just be like a dead man all the time, we'll just take you to the burning smashana and leave you there, and then we don't have to wait on you. And so I'm crying, but of course I'm not going to not sleep because that's all I like to do. So I'm crying because they abandoned me here. I guess I'll die, but I'll die sleeping. So then Nagarjuna said, well, if I could give you a teaching where you would be able to sleep and become a Buddha, would you like that? And he said, oh yes, I would like that. So then Nagarjuna, initiated him into the Guhya Samaja, the esoteric community tantra, secret community tantra. And he taught him to mix the clear light of sleep with the clear light of death, with the clear light of Buddhahood. And then he slept for 12 years. And then the villagers were very freaked out because they would come out now and then to see what had happened. Maybe the wife came out with a little bit of yogurt to give him, which I'm feeling sorry for him. And then when they could come, they would see he was surrounded by angels and he was being fed delicious things and he was, they were taking care of him with some kind of special deities. And then after 12 years, his sleeping body, without waking up, started levitating around the village, and he started teaching the Dharma to the villagers without waking up. And that was known as Khadgapa, one of the 84 Mahasiddhas. But he was doing it by this sleep yoga. That's what he was doing. Although in the context of the Guhya Samaja Mangala, because he was initiated in that. So that's the thing. Now the other thing about the Book of the Dead is that it really is to be studied in life. And here we would go back to one of the prayers where they talk about the 6 Bardos. Not that one. Where's the 6 Bardos one? Oh yeah, I think. No, not that one. It's so marvelous, this work, really. Oh, here, root versus the 6 between. Here we go. So, we are now in a between, right now. We're in what's called the life between. Oh, that's how I translate it. It's actually, they say birth between, because they call a life a birth. but really that's what we mean between birth and death. So we're between the birth moment, actually the conception moment, and the death moment. Now, those are the two times of when coming out of the clear light that we come. And so that's called the life between. And so the first between is the life between. And the root verse says, "Now when the life between dawns upon me, I will abandon laziness, as life has no more time." That's being in the moment, in other words. Unwavering, I will enter the path of learning, thinking, and meditating, and taking perceptions and mind as paths. I will realize the three bodies of enlightenment. This once that I have obtained the precious human body is not the time to stay on the path of distractions. So in the life between, the way of managing is to make it meaningful by evolving consciously toward a higher awareness and more wisdom and more compassion. Second between is the dream between. Hey, now when the dream between dawns upon me, I will give up corpse-like sleeping in delusion and mindfully enter unwavering the experience of reality. So in other words, I will mix my sleep with the clear light. Conscious of dreaming, I will enjoy the changes as clear light, not sleeping mindlessly like an animal. I will cherish the practice merging sleep and realization. So that's lucid dreaming, right? And realizing that you rise out of the clear light in the dream, and then when you go down from the dream, you go back to the clear light, and then rise out of the clear light back in your body when you wake up. Now, then the third between is, hey, now when the meditation between dawns upon me, I will abandon the host of distracting errors, focus in extreme free experience without releasing or controlling, and achieve stability in the creation and perfection stages. This is an enigma thing, but they're not zone-telling up a storm right away. Giving up busyness, now one point in meditation, I won't surrender to the power of erroneous addictions. That's the third one. So in other words, when you go into a meditation, it doesn't mean you have to go on a 3-year retreat or anything, but any time you go into meditation, you are, in a way, leaving the coarse reality of your sense reaction to sense stimuli and all that, and you're going into a between in your mind, and different states, meditative states and things like that. And you, as deep as you go, you enhance that by various things that you learn and so on. Hey, now the fourth one is the between concerned with death, and it's called the death point between. Hey, now when the death point between dawns upon me, I will give up the preoccupations of the all-desiring mind, enter unwavering the experience of the clarity of the precepts, and transmigrate into the birthless space of inner awareness. That's that clear light experience that they just recommended. About to lose this created body of flesh and blood, I will realize it to be impermanent illusion. So I won't any longer cling after having that other body. I will go straight into saying, my body is infinity. Shunyata jnana vajra svabhavatma koham. Then, however, they say that if one is not trained to recognize that, if one has not developed the ability to have recognized it in your life, in the meditation between, in the dream between, in the life between, then that death point between, although you will go into that clear light, you will not recognize it, and therefore you will not liberate yourself from all instinctual drives that push you. And then that's wrong. Unfortunately, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the language of it caters to dualistic Buddhist ideas. And so it makes you think that, oh, then the great thing will be clear light, and then once I'm clear light, I'll never bother with the world again. It's like the idea of a separated nirvana, but that is incorrect. There is no such thing. Any ultimate reality state that was separated from the relative reality state would be relative, would not be ultimate reality, right? Because there would be a boundary, would have a boundary between it and the relative. So that makes it just another relative state. So forget about it. There is no such thing. There are states that seem to be totally disconnected from differentiated reality, but those states are relative states because you go into them and you come back out of them. Once it goes up, it will also go down. What goes up comes back down. That's just the way it is. So So what if you attained your sense of oneness with the clear light at the moment of death, what it would mean would be that since you're everything then, you have no drive to be something out of yourself. But since you are everything, you also are all the other beings. And then they, as you, it's like you're part of your body. So then there's that being in hell, cooking there. And then even that is cooking, it's just like a fire, and the fire is itself clear light of bliss.
Yeah, sure.
And the being in it is clear light of bliss. And their subjective experience of agony is clear light of bliss. But it isn't bliss to them
Yeah, sure.
in their illusion that they're caught in. So you have infinite energy, and you are totally blissful and totally present, omnipresent. So why not fold around that person and cool them down? And be a medicine for them. And turn out that fire. And there's a wonderful thing in the Karandavyuha Sutra, where Avalokiteshvara goes to hell. And then his 1,000 eyes, which are actually millions of thousands, only a symbolic number, has millions of sensitivities. And they weep tears seeing the beings on the red-hot iron land of hell being roasted and all this. And they weep tears, and it extinguishes the fire of hell. So then the cooks in hell, the chefs and the sous chefs and the little Yama minions, they're called. They get like, hey, what is this guy? He's like putting out the griddle here. It's like, what is this? And they run to Yama, the Lord of the Dead. And they say, Yama, some guy came down and flooded the hell here, and so he put out our roasting griddle, like this is terrible. Oh no, that's got to be Avalokiteshvara, the universal compassion of all Buddhas. Don't worry about it. Go back and receive his teaching, and you're going to lose a few souls, which he will drag away with him to save them somewhere. But there'll be plenty more, don't worry. Dumb beings will screw themselves into such a state that they'll get there. And so then they do, and then he takes his, his tractor beam, like Starship Enterprise, and he tractors up all these broiling beings, out of hell, and establishes them in Pure Land.
So, Bob, you're saying
What?
So you're saying that it's not possible, like the idea of the liberation purely into Dharmakaya is a totally dualistic.
Well, no, it is purely into Dharmakaya, because this is all pure Dharmakaya.
No, but like what they're saying, to just merge into the clear light as a kind of only Dharmakaya with no Rupakaya.
Yeah, they let it seem like that. I'm just saying, I'm not saying they state that, but they let it seem like that. And so if you keep reading the book, they say, well, if you see this light and you go there, okay, then you'll be liberated.
Right.
And you'll go, no more birth for you.
Right.
And liberate, no more birth for you.
Right.
Which is the old dualistic Buddhist language, of the Theravada, which has a reason to teach to some people who can't imagine that this is the clear light of the void. Right now, you have it in your hand and your kid like this, and your hand, and it's all clear light of the void. You're clear light of the void. Buddha feels he's one with you, and of course he enjoys being you, but you're a good yogini. And it's hard to imagine that. We think, well, there's me, and there's a wall, and that's not that. It's a whole Buddha's body from Buddha's point of view. And they can't imagine that. So then if you told them that this is clear light, they would say, oh, this is nirvana. They would say, well, who needs this? I'm not a problem here. And then they become discouraged, or they become self-indulged, and they feel there's hopeless, nothing they can do about things. That nirvana means I'm still suffering. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So the dualistic form of Buddhism was useful for some people, lots of people.
But isn't even the idea of a pure land kind of a dualistic?
It is also a dualistic thing, and it's useful for other people. It's a really cool one, though, for people, simple people who have, other than that, they have like a happy hunting ground and some ancestors, and let's go give a cookie to the ancestor. You know what I mean? Then I want to become an ancestor, and I want my progeny, so they beat my wife or divorce her if she doesn't produce a son who's going to offer me a cookie when I'm an ancestor. This ridiculous business. About tribal blood identity, blood ego, tribe ego, nation ego, etc. So then, we have a pure land. Hey, ours is cooler. When Buddhism came to China, the Confucian ministers wrote to the emperors a memorial saying, Your Majesty, don't let those Buddhists in here. They go around, they dig big caves, And in the caves, they paint Monet's water lilies thousands of years ahead of time. And they tell people if they really are nice and they're kind and they pray to Buddha, whatever, that when they died, although they were peasants slaving in your fields, Your Majesty, planting rice seedlings, when they die, they'll go straight to the Pure Land and be born in front of Amitabha Buddha, who's 90 million miles tall and radiates lights out of his ears and everything. And have a look at Deshvara will catch you in his lotus catcher's mitt and install you on a lotus and you'll be in bliss. And it'll be really cool. And then when those people, Your Majesty, come and they see you in the yearly procession come out of your dinky little palace, they'll think it looks like a kind of horrible shack, and they won't respect you. And they'll all want to go to the Pure Land. This is terrible. It's subversive. You know, Chinese were always into control of people. You know, the word si. Si means color, in classical Chinese anyway. And it also means sex. And therefore, that blue pajama routine that Mao pulled, that was an ancient thing in China. Only the emperor had a yellow robe, could wear red, or had yellow painted walls, and everybody else was like in a hut with the blue pajama and no jewels. So libido wouldn't decide they wanted to have some fun. They just plant seedlings and reproduce. Just like the Catholic Church or something. No sex out of reproduction. So the Pure Land was like, really, it's like Monet water lilies, even more better. As you can go and sit in the water lily for life. Pure Land, you know. And it was really very effective. It still is the most popular form of Buddhism in Asia.
Yeah, sure. So if it's not coming...
What?
So from a non-dualistic view, then liberation in the in-between, what does that mean then?
What it means is being liberated from the drives that would make you involuntarily born, driven by instincts.
So you'd still be reborn in some realm, but it would be a conscious...
Once you're everywhere, you don't have to be reborn, but you can choose to nirmana yourself.
Sure.
Drawn by the energy of other beings' need. Because you become part of you become aware of yourself as this infinite love energy that wants to satisfy every being. And, you know, the Buddha's problem, when Buddha attains that bliss melt into the clear light of the void, then the problem is, but that energy wants to enfold every being and flood them with bliss, and then they're cool. Then they're all cool. But the problem is that a being who's really into their ego, if they get flooded with bliss, they think they're being invaded by the alien. The body snatcher has arrived. And so then they get more uptight. So unfortunately, Buddha cannot bomb them into bliss. Buddha would like to bomb them into bliss, but can't.
Yeah, sure.
So, because they'll resist, you know. So therefore, Buddha has to like lure them into opening up and trusting a little. That's why Maitreya, for example, you know Maitreya? Maitreya comes in this difficult time. That's the next Buddha. And he emanates onto the planet as dogs. And then a dog that teaches human beings something subliminal, which is, I'm a wolf and I could eat you, but now I love you. I'm so loyal to you. Please pet me. So then human being can like pet, you know, pet. That's the horrible thing that's why the Chinese have not recovered to start having fun again, really, except the weird, armored, you know, exploitative fun of super rich people, super rich Communist Party members with their mistresses and whatever, because Mao deprived them of all pets. And Chai Ling, one of the Democratic student women who used to be around, she had always had this mutt with her, and she would go get an award from the liberals in America who were trying to pretend they cared about democracy in China. Meanwhile, they were actually making money with Chinese slave labor in their factories. But still, she would bring always this dog with her. And then we had a plan, the repetification of China, of how to bring pets for them to pet everywhere. But then the problem is, you'd have to inject them with something that would make their meat taste bad, because otherwise they will eat their pets. That's the problem. We didn't solve that. So my point is, it is true liberation, but luckily liberation comes, the wisdom of liberation, which is via wisdom, of knowing what reality is, but knowing it without subject-object duality, knowing it by being it, being reality. But that comes with total compassion. Because when you are everything, then you also are every bit of of anybody who's suffering.
Yep.
Even if it's an illusory suffering. Luckily it's illusory because that means you can heal it. But then you automatically feel like healing it. But you don't have to because you're not driven.
Yep.
But in a way, poor Buddha does have to. You know, it's like, they say, but they don't want to reveal that because the people's selfishness then, oh, I don't want to be, like in Shantideva verse where it says, why would I want to be a Buddha and feel everybody else's pain? Right? Much better, I don't even like my own pain. Why would I like to know everybody else's pain? Because of course they don't know the power. So he answers with bliss. He said, because when you are one with all beings, it's like the bliss of the wild goose, the wild Himalayan goose, who lands in the spring in the lotus pond. He's just in bliss in his lotus pond. That wild goose. But he doesn't have to land in that pond. But
Bob,
he feels like it.
But Bob?
Yes.
Wasn't your question then, within this book, within the text,
Yeah.
At some point, some people will choose to go to the Pure Land within this
Oh,
process?
no, they don't really make a fuss about Pure Land here.
Okay, but...
It's just liberated.
But in a way, yes,
around,
because,
yeah.
yes, actually there are a number of Pure Lands, because if they miss the clear light identification,
yeah.
then they come to the peaceful deities over here. And then Vairochana emits a blue light, a brilliant blue light, and then if they are smart enough not to be frightened of this dazzling blue light, and not to skitter off to some calm, like dull, white light, where they might be reborn as a deity, as a god in one of the heaven realms. And if they go right to the blue light, they open up to that blue light, then they'll go into the heart of Vairochana, and they'll go into Vairochana's pure land.
Right. Where that's more the Sambhogakaya liberation, where the clear light is the Dharmakaya liberation. And
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, but then when they go there into his heart, then they hit the Dharmakaya.
Yeah, sure, but it's in the Sambhogakaya.
Yeah, through the
manifestation,
Sambhogakaya, because Vairochana is simply a manifestation of all Buddhas in that form. And then there's 5 days of 7 days of doing that, right? And each one, they keep saying, well, if you miss that, then you go on, and then you see Amitabha, and then you see Amoghasiddhi, and then you see Akshobhya, and then you see Radhasambhava, the 5 main Buddhas, and they're those 5 peaceful Buddhas, and they're with their yum, yab yum, so you're reborn in the heart of Father, Mother there, and you can go to those Pure Lands, and then if you miss all of those, then you go here, and then the fierce guys come, the Yab-yums, and then they can draw you into Pure Land. So yeah, there is a thing of Pure Land, but to see Pure Land, the simple Buddhists might think, oh, I made it, I got to the Pure Land. But again, the Pure Land is not Buddhahood. It's just a temporary rest where you get some teaching, and then back to the salt mines. And actually, this Pure Land, which is Shakyamuni Buddha's Pure Land, the message of Vimalakirti Sutra, this Pure Land is the best. And because those people, they get in Pure Land, and they're like, meditating. And they're not even worrying about a Saturday night date because they're both male and female, so they don't have to go become transgender and get all gay or not gay or whatever it is, or straight, because they're making it with themselves all the time. And they're in bliss in that Pure Land, sitting there, samadhi, and the Buddha radiates a light, and they go into bigger samadhi, and they have shamatha, and they're like really cool, and whatever. But what? Oh, gee, where's hell? Where are the other beings? Uh-oh, when am I going to develop my compassion to do something about the other beings? And then they have to go down and they get to planet Earth, and then people, they're like lying by the side of the road, they're down like grubbing in the garbage can in Beverly Hills, what is it? So they get, people because it's this planet. You're right nearby the realms of suffering, and yet you have access to the realization of enlightenment. Because enlightenment is where you see everything as perfect, and therefore you have the ability to bring everybody out of the hells. It's compassion and kindness, not just some state. The Brahmins, then they don't like that. They want to go to Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Bye. You guys wash the dishes. I'm going Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Goodbye. Buddha specifically taught that Nirvikalpa Samadhis are not nirvana. They are just a state. It seems like it to someone who is like, basically it's an ultimately psychotic achievement to achieve a state of absolute isolation from everybody else. As if you are not bound together with them by webs of light, like he was reading, like that nice lady. Right? Everybody's all linked with this incredible entanglement of light. It's so good. You know, so there's no escape. That's why people are bodhisattvas and Buddhas. And that's why the Brahmins, when Buddhism was wiped out by Muslims, the Brahmins didn't really hustle up to Tibet and bring it back, because then they got to be privileged again, you know, and then the caste system was an absolute. You know, they're the mouths of God. And the mouth does two things. It recites Vedas and it swallows cookies that the faithful bring. It doesn't have to cook the cookies. It doesn't have to harvest them, plant them, just swallows them. Then they have these marvelous bellies that you see at Mathura. Right? Vrindavan. Smooth, beautiful bellies with big piles of gundis, or what are they called? Cookies, barfis, gulab jamuns. Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay, so all I'm saying is that because that language of liberation, meaning somehow getting away from here, is very widespread in the Buddhist world too, because people are self-centered and they can't imagine being totally happy in the middle of all this. They can't accept it, that they just can't imagine that. So they want to think that this pure happiness is some place where they're going to be special, all alone. And Buddha lets them think that. Then nirvana, but then he doesn't quite do it. And they say, well, is there a self after nirvana? Well, I'm not saying. Is there no self after? I'm not saying. He wouldn't say. And what happens, of course, is when you really get to the Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and it's boring. And finally you pop right out. Right? So the idea is to know that ahead of time. To know what is called the royal reason of relativity, which Buddha preceded Einstein in discovering by 2,500 years. And that is, anything that you experience, you, a relative being, is relative if you experience it. Even if you experience what seems to you like an absolute, it's relative. Because you experience it as a relative being. So therefore, for example, people say, certain people who I won't say who, but I think you might know, runs around doing stupid things, saying, I realized emptiness so I can do whatever I want. Nobody ever realizes emptiness. Emptiness realizes you as a being that can't realize emptiness. Because it's absolute, therefore there's no contact to it for a relative being, no way of possessing. There's a giving up of that selfish wish to possess, and a melting into a vast infinite reality, but you don't possess that. You are that. And that includes a lot of suffering beings that you then feel like helping, without strain. You automatically want to help them, right? Because they are you. It's like when you're really clicking as a yoga teacher, and there's that person, like someone like me, like, and you know, you have an empathetic feeling, maybe this time tug a little more, because it'll help, or don't tug anymore, because it wouldn't help. And you have to be the really top form as a teacher, you have to really be able to feel, practically, from looking at that leg, just how far it can go and can't go, right? And the ideal yoga teacher, of course, would be a Buddha, where you would feel that leg was your leg. And you could feel exactly every subatomic piece of nerve, of fiber, of knot, of everything in it, right? You see? So we didn't do the sixth between. So then the fifth and sixth. So now when reality between dawns upon me, now they call it reality between to distinguish it from the death point between, which is just clear light. Then reality between is like a kind of inner reality. And that's where you see these deities, and you see the fierce, peaceful deities, mild deities I call them, because I don't like to say wrathful. Mild deities and fierce deities. You see them, and they're all the same being, really, but there are different manifestations depending on your mood when you get to confront them. And then you see the scientist stages, the Vidyadharas. I call them Vidyadhara scientists. They're holders of science. And one Tibetan guy said, oh, you can't do that. Those guys have long hair and they're wearing a loincloth and they don't have a white coat and a mirror on their forehead. You can't say they're scientists. I said, well, they are scientists. And actually nowadays you can recognize your quantum physicists on the college campus because they don't wear neckties. And they don't all dress up, and they have a maybe Indian thing, and they're like hippies.
Yeah, they should look
they have
like
long hair.
Yeah.
And they're kind of the other scientists who are making money and making something they're patenting, they're looking nervous at these guys. So they are getting to be looking like Vidyadharas.
Right.
Okay, so I will let go of the hallucinations of instinctive terror, enter the recognition of all objects as my mind's own visions, and understand this as the pattern of perception in the between. Come to this moment, arrived at this most critical cessation, I will not fear my own visions of deities mild and fierce. Then the last one, so that's the reality between where they go through like, what is it, like 21 days or something? Yeah. 7 on the mild, 7 on the fierce, 7 on the Vidyadharas or something like that. Yeah. 21, I think. Leaving 28 to deal with the existence between, I forget. Then the last one is called existence between, and that's where you actually get into rebirth. If you miss getting to a Pure Land, then you get to rebirth in a more earthly plane. Hey, now when the existence between dawns upon me, I will hold my will with mind one-pointed and increase forcefully the impulse of positive evolution and block the womb door. I will still remember to be revulsed. Now courage and positive perception are essential. I will give up envy and contemplate all couples as my spiritual mentor, father, mother. So there it's a sort of to prevent being born in an unreflective embodiment, as a human actually. Although that's kind of illogical because you want to be born as a human in a Buddhist country where there are good gurus and teachers. But again, you don't want to do it involuntarily driven by instinct and by lust. You want to do it as a wish to be there in that place to develop or something. So that's called the existence between. And then it has one final verse. With mind distracted, never thinking death is coming, to slave away on the pointless business of mundane life, and then to come out empty, it is a tragic error. Recognition of necessity is the holy teaching of the gods, so won't you live this divine truth from now on? These are the words of the great adepts. If you don't put the mentor's precept in your mind, won't you be the one who deceives yourself? That's really good. I like that. Padmasambhava, that is. That's the great Siddha Padmasambhava. So, okay, so you want to look at a day in the reality between? Or you want some questions at this point? What do you want to do? Or you want to comment on something? The mild deity reality between, but otherwise we might look at one day of that.
There's a question, Bob?
I have a question.
Yes.
How do these 8 stages relate to the tunnel with the light at the end and all of that?
They relate very closely, actually, in the sense that these 8 stages are where you get to that light, the tunnel with the light. Actually, Tibetans say, is where your mind has withdrawn from your coarse senses. And then the 3 lights of moonlight, sunlight, and dark light are when your energy is in your central nervous system, which is throughout your body. That's the chakra system. And that's formulated consciously by yogis into the chakra system. And then when the tunnel is the central channel, and the subtle consciousness is shooting down the central channel toward the drop of the super subtle body-mind, which is in the center of the heart chakra in the central channel. And the wrapping of the central channel, the binding of the central channel by the right and left, red and white channels, is released in the death moment. And the consciousness comes down out of the brain and goes into the heart center there. And the tunnel is going down that heart, and then the bright light at the end of the tunnel is the clear light. That's seeing that clear light, although some of the bright lights might be the process of still in the subtle where you're seeing the white light and the sunlight and the dark light. And then it might be. You know, in different cases I think it's different, but it very much corresponds to that. And then, you know, in those near-death experiences, there usually are guides, which are like these peaceful, mild deities and fierce deities, and the guides usually say, okay, be cool, don't worry, and often send people back who report that, because their time is not really there, and they still have more to learn on Earth or more to contribute and so on, and they get sent back, and they often don't want to go back, right? Because they're already at that point when they're down the tunnel and seeing the clear light there, the way they get into the central channel is through bliss. You know, death and orgasmic bliss are very interconnected, you know, and you know, that's why in French, the word for orgasm, you know what it is in French? It's le petit mort, the little death. And the word for enlightenment in Zen is the great death. And so the process of melting out of being invested in the coarse thing into sort of the center of the being is a bliss process, actually. And actually that is a terrifying thing to people. When people feel this, they feel frightened. A lot of people are what are called orgasmically impotent because they fear being swept away in an inner flow of just melting and sort of surrendering their sense of boundary and sense of defense and sense of whatever it is. And it's terrifying, actually, to some people who are emotionally armored, as Wilhelm Reich would have said. So I think that's one way in which it can relate, you know. The second one that I read, where it's the mother and the father, and that's a mother-father in union. That's like a primal scene, ultimate reality as the primal scene. You know psychology? So the primal scene is where you see your mother and father in union, you know, and freak out because there is a jealousy of the mother by the one who's destined to be reborn female, who is oriented toward that wants to be female. There's jealousy toward the father by the one who wants to be born male. And the description of the rebirth scene is like a preconception Oedipal crisis. It's so amazing. This thousands of years earlier. It really is, you know, Freud discovery, you know. It's really something. I want to say in the beginning of the existence between, we could do this, but there's an interesting thing in the existence of the beginning of the existence between, where he says, and they warn people, don't go here, don't go there, don't be attracted to do that. And this is what you were saying, it's a sign of death, before death. But he says here, repeat this loud and clear and stir your memory. This is in the existence when you're getting very close to rebirth. It is important in the 49 days. It is important to meditate on its meaning and put it into practice. As for its meaning, quote, now when the existence between dawns upon me, unquote, means that you are now wandering within the existence between. A sign of that is that when you look in water, you will not see your reflection. Because you see water in like a dreamlike state in this. You have no shadow. You have no substantial flesh and blood body.
As a Bardo being.
Yeah. These are signs that your mental body is wandering in the existence between. Now you must hold one pointed in your mind, the unwavering willpower. This one pointed will is of chief importance. It's like reins to guide a horse. You can achieve whatever your will intends, so don't open your mind to negative evolution. But remember the teachings, instructions, initiations, authorizations, and inspirations you received in the human realm. You know, intensify the result of all good evolutionary actions, etc. Don't be lazy, etc. Be concentrated. But that isn't what I was actually looking for. I was looking for this instruction. It's so great. And this is like the movie goes, hey, noble one, as you have have such a ghostly body, you encounter relatives in familiar places as if in a dream. When you meet these relatives, though you can communicate with them, they do not answer. When you see your relatives and dear ones crying, you will think, oh, now I have died, what can I do? You feel a searing pain like a fish flopping in hot sand. But however greatly you suffer, tormenting yourself at this time does not help. Or if you have a spiritual teacher, pray to your spiritual teacher. Or else pray to the compassionate archetype deity Avalokiteshvara, the compassionate one. Don't be attached to your loved ones, it is useless. Pray to the compassionate ones and do not suffer or be terrified. Hey, no, driven by the swift wind of evolution, your mind is helpless and unstable, riding the horse of breath like a feather blown on the wind, spinning and fluttering. You tell the mourners, don't cry, here I am. They take no notice, and you realize you have died and you feel great anguish. Now do not indulge in your pain. There is a constant twilight, gray as the pre-dawn autumn sky, neither day nor night. That kind of between can last for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks, up to 49 days, etc. They're great instructions, really. It's so neat. I guess it was not in that, it was in the reality between. This description of what you're like in the between, you know, that I was looking for. This is not here. Maybe it's earlier.
Where is what he just what you just
what's that?
what you just read us about seeing your relatives?
Yeah.
Where is this stage with respect to the other ones you just discussed? When is this happening?
This experience of being in the Bardo, in the between, and seeing your relatives and people being like as if you're on Earth. Where is this in the sequence? She's asking.
Oh, anywhere. Once you're out of the clear light, which is for a few days sometimes, 3 or 4 days, you're just completely in space, but you're, unfortunately, normally you'd be unconscious, you wouldn't identify it as yourself. Then once you're in any of these things, this might happen at any point. It's not a rigid, there's no rigid thing, and different beings will have it in different ways. And this is just a general, these are general things that happen to you.
So
this
is what would happen if you do not wait and attain this oneness with this white light. This is another presence that you might go to.
She's saying if you don't recognize the clear light, then once you enter the Bardo of becoming, or
you seem to have an individual body, and you feel it's almost like your previous body in life. You feel that. But you don't necessarily pay that much attention to it unless you're more lucid. Just like in a dream, if you remember a dream, you remember as if you were just yourself in the dream, right? But sometimes you can have a changed body in the dream. You might be different.
And what happens?
But you normally don't pay attention to it. You're just in awareness.
And what happens in this, and besides for that experience, what happens in this Bardo space? What is this space?
Well, lots of things happen. You will see these different visions. You will have a chance to go to see these deities. And actually, if you're from a Christian culture or Jewish culture, if you have a different idea of angels or whatever it is, you won't see these Tibetan ones. These originally Indian ones. You won't see them, probably. You will see some powerful light, and you might think it was Jesus, or you might think it was Mary, or or you might Moses, or whoever, some cherubim or something. Or I think modern people, they might see, I expect to see Walter Cronkite. Or some people might see Burt Lancaster, or Marilyn Monroe or something. People will see something that they subconsciously think of as some sort of idealized thing, Or the angel Gabriel or Michael, like Muhammad saw, when he channeled the Quran, He would see what he expected to see of the angel Michael and Gabriel. And I'm not finding...
Well, to follow up on that, and to go back to you're using the movie Ghost.
Yes?
So, Patrick Swayze was in a Bardo.
Yeah, in that movie Ghost.
Yes. He would be in that, which stage?
Remember, he was there, and then he was very freaked out because the murderer was after his wife, and he wanted to get that, whatever it was that the murderer originally wanted from him, some patented thing, computer disk or something. But murderer was pretending to come on to the wife, that he was in love with her and all this kind of thing. He was trying to be kind to her and all this. but actually he was potentially going to kill her. And he was trying to defend her, right? So he was desperately going around trying, but then she couldn't react to him. So he was frustrated as a ghost. And then a couple of times different people died. You know, then he met the guy in the subway who had learned to manage as a ghost, and he could stay on the subway instead of falling through the floor. And then he learned a little more how to maneuver as a ghost. Then he finally found Whoopi, who was a psychic who could see him and talk to him. And it was so cool.
What would that be, a Bardo?
Yeah, well, he was stuck, you see. Instead of thinking about going on and finding the clear light, he was stuck by his tremendous concern for his wife. And of course, I think he was attached to her too, but also he mainly also wanted to warn her of her danger because he was in love with her and so on. And then, you know, there was when some of the bad guys died, then these black things came up out of the ground. Those were like the Yama minions, and they dragged them down, you know. And that's all out of here, you know. The guy, Bruce Rubin, he read this. I met Bruce years recently, and he totally was involved in this. And he was making it come alive for people in a brilliant way. It's really great.
So, Bob, sometimes when people become ghosts, they can also get stuck in the Bardo dimension for some time too, and not really be able to take rebirth and these kind of things as well.
Well, they say though that then they die in the Bardo and are reborn in the Bardo continually.
Right.
So they continue to go through a dying experience as their dream body, but then they keep coming back in the Bardo because either some strong attachment or some hatred and revenge and vengeance thing keeps them in there because they just want to be involved in that previous circumstance. For whatever, for a positive or a negative, well, actually both are a bit negative, but reason they can't let go or they want to harm. You know? Yes?
Well, they say that there are people that cross people over, people that die suddenly, like in a tsunami, or people that are stuck that can't cross over. There are people that assist them crossing over.
Yes, that's Lama work. There's some specialists in that people consult. And then there's that, even at the time of death, there's the thing called the POA, transmigration, or I call it soul ejection, precept and teaching that one can receive and learn to practice and cultivate, do a retreat. And that is where a person goes and hooks up their consciousness with the central channel, you know, super subtle consciousness of the, you know, body-mind consciousness of the person, and sort of projects one's own mind out into their central nervous system, links up with that, and then goes hick, and then makes it jump up, out the crown of the head toward a pure land, toward a Vairochana type land, as a good way of making them take a good rebirth. And there are specialists who do that. And one can learn to do that, and also one can learn to do it about oneself, and do a soul ejection, and then there are rituals about that. And that they really work. We had a friend who was a Tibetan Lama from the Dalai Lama's monastery, who was a brilliant, wonderful guy. He was doing a PhD with me, learning Sanskrit and everything. He was a mandala making one, a very great artist one, also a good scholar. And he wanted the Namgyal monks to really properly learn Sanskrit, so they would say their mantras with a good enunciation and everything like that. And he actually stayed a monk, unlike the others who go out and live in the street. And but he had this terrible lung issue. A Naga had hit him in the lung, actually, they say. Yeah. And it was the Naga where the Dalai Lama made his house. And he had done the rite of moving the Naga, but that Naga was a little grumpy about moving, so he got the hit. His name was Pema Losang Chugyan, actually, the guy. And he did die finally after 4 operations in New York. But after he died, all his friends, my graduate students and me, we got there and we did one thing, not with the Book of the Dead, but with a different thing, based on the Yamantaka Tantra. And we did a power thing where we visualized His Holiness, his teacher, as Amitayus, and sitting on top of his head, and then going up into the central channel or something. And I actually saw his face, smiling. Sure. He was so happy we helped him with that, actually. He wasn't necessarily a practitioner of that, but we kind of did it as a ritual, as a group of mind of all the friends of his, and we did that right for him. And in the middle of it, I actually saw him smiling so happily, and we kind of gave him a boost. It was like we gave him a leg up. It really worked, actually.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I've heard many stories of people that have seen and done POAs where sometimes like the corpse can actually look a little bit uncomfortable, and after they do the POA, then there's like this different peaceful sensation that they have.
That's so
I've heard that a few times.
That's all scientific stuff. Subtle kind of deep science, yes.
this might be a little bit too much to do right now, but can you cover what each of the peaceful deities, what their emotional association is?
Well, yeah. This system is sometimes a little different than some of the other tantras, but Vairochana is the first one, and where is he? Vairochana in the unexcelled yoga tantras usually is hatred transmuted into ultimate is usually ignorance transformed into mirror wisdom.
I thought it was to the
But in this case, it might be different.
No?
What?
Isn't it ignorance to Dharmadhatu wisdom? Or is that
No,
different in
ignorance
some
to, in the unexcelled yoga, no, it's ignorance to mirror wisdom. And Akshobhya, who's in the center in unexcelled yoga tantras, is hatred into Dharmadhatu perfection wisdom, or purity.
So sometimes the wisdoms.
They reverse in some other context. But they're very close. Mirror is mirroring Dharmadhata.
Yeah, sure.
But the reason hatred is because hatred is particularly, or anger, is connected to intelligence, which is an analytic, and it wants to take things apart to see how they are constituted, and therefore eventually everything dissolves under its analysis, and they discover the clear light, which is the non-discovery of anything other than the clear light type of thing, right? So that's why actually hatred fits better with that.
Interesting.
And whereas mirror wisdom, because it's seeing material things which seem to appear to be separate things, intrinsically real and non-relational and non-empty, then that nevertheless mirrors that they are ultimate reality. So that works better. But I'm not sure this one. Let me see. So, hey, noble one, at this time when your mind and body, this is what I was looking for. Yeah. Are parting ways, pure reality manifests in subtle, dazzling visions, vividly experienced, naturally frightening and worrisome, shimmering like a mirage on the plains in autumn. Do not fear them, do not be terrified, do not panic. You have what is called an instinctual mental body, not a material flesh and blood body. Thus, whatever sounds, lights, and rays may come at you, they cannot hurt you. You cannot die. It is enough just for you to recognize them as your own visions. Understand that this is the between. Hey, noble one, if you don't recognize them as your own perceptions in this way, whatever other meditations and achievements you may have experienced in the human world, if you did not meet this particular instruction, the lights will frighten you, the sounds will panic you, the rays will terrify you. If you don't know the key of this instruction, you will not recognize the sounds, lights, and rays, and you will wander in the life cycle. And then, hey, noble one, having fainted for 4.5 days, you are now proceeding. You have woken up with the worry, what is happening to me? Recognize that you are in the between. Now, since the life cycle is in suspension, all things dawn as lights and deities. All space dawns full of azure light. Now from the central Buddha land, all-pervading drop. The Lord Vairochana appears before you, white-bodied, sitting on a lion throne, holding in his hand an 8-spoked wheel, united with his consort Akasha Datishvari, that is the goddess of the realm of space, the natural purity of the consciousness aggregate, the blue light of the reality perfection. Yes, so in this case it is the blue light of reality perfection wisdom, but with Vairochana, which is fine. It's, as you say, there's a switch. A clear and vivid color blue, frighteningly intense, shines piercingly from the heart center of this Vairochana couple, dazzling your eyes unbearably. Simultaneously, the soft white light of the gods, hey, come dance with us up here in the Trump Tower, shines upon you and penetrates you in parallel with the bright blue, in parallel with the bright blue light. At that time, influenced by negative evolution, you panic and are terrified of that bright blue light of reality, perfection, wisdom, and you flee from it. And you feel a liking for the soft white light of the gods, and you approach it. But you must not panic at that blue light, the clear, piercing, brilliant, frightening, supreme wisdom light, clear light. Do not fear it. It is the light ray of the transcendent Lord, the reality, perfection, wisdom. Feel attracted to it with faith and reverence. Make it the answer to your prayer, thinking, it is the light ray of the compassion of Lord Vairochana. I must take refuge in it. It is the way of the Lord Vairochana comes to escort you through the straits of the between. It is the light ray of the compassion of Vairochana. Don't be enticed by the soft white light of the gods. Don't be attached to it. Don't long for it. If you cling to it, you will wander into the realm of the gods, and you will continue to cycle through the 6 realms of driven existence. It is an obstacle to creation, to cessation, the path of freedom. So don't look upon it, but be devoted to the brilliant, penetrating blue light. Aim your intense willpower toward Vairochana, and repeat after me the following prayers. When I roam the life cycle driven by strong delusion, may the Lord Vairochana lead me on the path of the clear light of reality, perfection, wisdom. May his consort Buddha Datishvari back me on the way, deliver me from the dangerous straits of the between, and carry me to perfect Buddhahood. Thus praying with fierce devotion, you dissolve in rainbow light into the heart of Vairochana couple, whence you will enter the central pure land, Ganavyuha, dense array, and become a Buddha by way of the body of perfect beatitude. That's a Sambhoga. You know, they say enjoyment body. One guy even translated as utility body. What? It's like into his utility folder in his computer. You know, but Sambhoga, Sambhoga in Kama Sutra means orgasm.
Yeah, sure.
So Sambhoga means beatitude in a sort of holy level. So that's the thing. So, but you see, that's the delusion going into wisdom. Sure. Instead of hatred, analytic intelligence. Because delusion is not intelligence.
Yeah.
So delusion is better with mirror wisdom, I think.
Yeah. No, and
if they can reassign it.
But none of these and Vairochana often switch. I mean, it's white with the blue light and blue with the white light. They're kind of
or blue with blue. But the point is that these things. That's the point. People think, what's the ultimate mantra? What's the ultimate color? What's the ultimate motion? They're assignable in different ways.
Yeah, sure.
All teachings about relative reality and mandalas and pure lands are still relative. They're the extraordinary, the Buddha relative, but they're relative. Yeah, totally. Sambhogakaya is relative. Yeah. So they are only relative. There's no absolute thing that is only this way or only that way. That's what's great about it. Mm. So then there's this thing, and then the next one is Vajrasattva couple, and goes on. But I still didn't find the one that I really wanted to talk about, where it is how you're 9 times more intelligent in the Bardo. And don't be mad if people are like ridiculous. It's in here somewhere. But, and some of them are just even the words are so vivid. From the heart of Vajrasattva, the mirror wisdom, a cloth of blue light rays shines brilliantly upon you. So these are light rays that are make a cloth, but they're made of light, a cloth made of light, connecting to your heart center, on which shining blue drops like turquoise bowls face down toward you, adorned by other drops and droplets, and all shine upon you. You know, it gives you the imagination like something really to work with. And from the heart of Ratnasambhava, a cloth of equalizing wisdom, yellow light rays shines brilliantly upon you, on which golden drops like golden bowls, adorned by other golden drops and droplets, face down and dawn upon you. From the heart center of Amitabha, the discriminating wisdom, red light cloth shines brilliantly upon you, on which radiant red drops like coral bowls facing down to you, endowed with the deep luster of wisdom, very bright and penetrating, each adorned by 5 natural red drops. All these shine upon you, adorned by drops and droplets without center or limit. They also shine upon you, connected to your heart center. And these, so you get all these ribbons of light energy come to you, you know, and if you recognize them, so then these are called the vision of the 4 wisdoms in combination, the inner passageway of Vajrasattva. At that time, you should remember the orientation previously given by your spiritual teacher. If you remember that orientation, you will trust those visions. You will recognize reality like the child meeting the mother, or like the greeting of a long familiar person, and you will cease all reifying notions. Recognizing your visions as your own creations, you will trust you are being held on the changeless path of pure reality, and you will achieve the samadhi of continuity. Your awareness will dissolve into the body of great effortlessness, and you will become a Buddha in the beatific body, never to be reversed. And then you'll get all these soft lights, which are gods and pretas and humans and titans and all these other forms of life. You don't want to go for those. So it's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's beautiful stuff. But that's why Industrial Light and Magic, you know, although George Lucas sold it now, unfortunately I don't know the new
Disney.
owner. I forget who he sold it to.
Disney.
Who?
Disney, I believe.
Maybe to Disney. Yeah. And they could illustrate these. And they can make them for children who die prematurely and even for grown-ups.
Yeah,
and you could go and sit in a room, you know, with earphones and this shiny lights and all this stuff, and then the dull lights.
Yeah.
You could rehearse all of it.
Yeah.
And then if you die and you're just nothing, what the hell? You're not going to feel you wasted your time. But if you die and you have something happen, you will maybe be happy.
Definitely.
To have been, you know, like rehearsed, you know. It's like a rehearsal.
Bob, I have a question. You said something last night
Yes.
about the chakras and the chakra system, that if someone dies in a car accident, it's okay because the chakra system will leave.
Oh
the
yeah, I
body.
think they'll create you know, like Matrix, you know. It's like when the Matrix things gets jammed into his brain in the back, you know, and then he's in the Matrix, and then he's recreating a body or whatever it is. Remember in the Matrix.
Yes.
So it's just a sudden thing, but the subtle body, the mind of the, especially yogi, I think, can have the subtle body. Even an ordinary person, the subtle body will likely go with them. All that got smashed in the nuclear explosion or the auto accident or whatever it was, is that when the piano fell on your head on 10th Street, it was just the coarse body is smashed. But that does not necessarily smash the subtle body. Because from the point of view of Buddhist science, that's why I was looking for this thing, but I couldn't find it. But the Buddhist science, the holographic pattern at the subtle body level of the being is what creates the brain and what programs the brain. And that's why when it's out of the brain, far from ceasing, the being becomes more sensitive, has more synaptic connections, has more things in there, in the subtle chakras, 1,000-petal chakra, lotus chakra. Those numbers are just symbolic. There's infinite sensitivity in the being that has been lucky enough to get close to the human form. We are such a privileged form because what we are is like a blank CPU hard disk to be completely programmed, deprogrammed, and reprogrammed. And therefore we can become worse monster than a dinosaur, and we can become more saintly than Buddha. We can become Buddha.
But is the disc?
What?
Is the disc the chakra system? I mean, this image of
the subtle body is the chakra system and the wind system, and there's Za Lom Tigle, Nadi, Prana, Nadi, Vayu, Bindu. Nadi, Vayu, Bindu. That's the subtle body, and it is basically the central nervous system from stem to crown. Not just in the brain.
So does that create the Bardo body eventually?
Yeah, that's like a Bardo body. No, what a Bardo body is you go out of the coarse body through the first 4 dissolutions. Then the subtle mind is the 3 next dissolutions: moon, sun, black. Mm-hmm. And that mind is the mind that deals with the drops: red, white. The black connects to the red, white, and blue. Red connects to red. I'm sorry, and the blue connects to black. And so that's the mind of that. And that mind is an instinctual mind, and it has these 80 instinctual patterns in it. 33, 40, and 7, or 40, 33, and 7. I keep confusing. And those 80 instinctual patterns, for the person who hasn't trained and is not enlightened, has not developed any level of detachment from their addictive emotions, those instincts then cause the person to surge around in the Bardo body. So then what the Bardo body is, and that person, to get out of the coarse body, bounces all the way down to the clear light. Then the clear light thing separates from the coarse body, and then in separating from the coarse body, it goes up through the subtle mind, which are those 3 lights, and which is then a hologram of the chakra system, something like that, like a bowl of fibers, something. And then that then doesn't need to go through earth, water, fire, and that it creates a Bardo body just by the power of mental habit, out of those instincts, out of those energies. And actually, in the perfection stage of unexcelled yoga, Tantra, at that point, instead of a Bardo body, the yogi who has developed a creation stage practice, where they've been Vajrayogini or Chakra Samvara or with Samaja or something, then they create like a Bardo body, it's called the magic body. Some rude translators call it illusion body, Maya Deha, but I call that a magic body. And then with that body, they rehearse being a Buddha, actually. It's a very deep, far out being in perfection stage.
And then that's also when practitioners are liberated in the magic, the gyulu, right?
Yeah.
At the moment of death, and they actually leave it's at that moment, right? When after they reverse the 3 stages, then they'll just manifest.
Yeah, that's right. But they manifest because they have trained themselves in this Maha and Anu Yoga.
Yeah, sure.
So if you try to do Ati Yoga without doing that, then you don't have a vehicle, you don't have a stable vehicle.
Yeah, there's no Rupakaya as a basis of...
That's right, that's right. But in some case, someone might have done a lot of creation stage in previous life, so there's a way of... But you see, the Maha, Anu, and Ati, I think divides really, if you take the 5 perfection stages, the Maha and Anu are the creation stage together with the first 2.5 stages of the perfection stage.
The body
then the top 2.5 stages where you have the magic body and you're plunging it in and out of the clear light, and then you achieve Yoganada, both learners and non-learners Yoganada. That's Ati. That's just Ati. And someone who has the creation, the first part of perfection stage and the creation stage from previous life practice could maybe jump in there. But others are kidding themselves.
Yeah, sure.
Totally kidding themselves.
Can you?
If they try to get out of, genetically engineering up a Buddha body, some Bodhikaya type body out of the 34 arms or the 6 arms or the 4 arms or whatever it is, the archetype, the Ishtadeva God. Okay? Don't look worried.
I'm not, no, I still don't feel like my answer about the chakras. Do they dissolve? The chakras dissolve, or is that the subtle body?
You recreate a chakra body based on the impressions of the mind from your life, right? Based on these 80 impressions. Then after
the chakra, you leave the subtle body with the coarse body when you break out in the clear light. And then you maybe produce a different one in a normal death, let's say by a yogi, depending on what you've done about it. But you leave them behind because it's the ordinary person, that chakra system is not open anyway. It's all tied up.
Yeah.
It's all locked up. And it just sort of wrenches itself open in a rough death. I just speculated that in a rough death like that, where there isn't the structure of where the drop dissolves down from the crown, another drop dissolves up from the genital chakra, and they meet in the heart, and then the red and white baseball in the heart that encapsulates the blue drop, which is the super subtle mind. That's a super subtle body, super subtle mind. Then that happens. There's no time for that to happen. I just speculated that such a person will somehow holographically keep in a different plane, unaffected even by nuclear explosion, in a more subtle plane. They'll keep those chakra system, and then they'll dissolve out of that chakra system and dissociate from that. And that was my speculation. But I like it.
Okay.
They don't talk like that. They don't say that. Because they don't think of dying suddenly, because you get killed by a sword or something. You don't have nuclear explosions in the old days.
Actually,
you don't have this.
That was something interesting. We were speaking with Phakyab Rinpoche too about organ donation.
Yes.
And he was saying how he doesn't like organ donation for people that are having a slow death. And then we were saying, well, when people have a traumatic injury, say they fall off a motorcycle or something, they die instantly. He said, in that case, maybe it's better because you go through these 8 stages very fast.
Yes.
And then the possibility that you're disturbing the body while it hasn't exited is less because the entire process is moving a lot faster.
Right, that's very cool.
Yeah. So he said, maybe for these kind of people, then organ donation's okay.
Good. Yeah. That's good. So you can put on your driver's license, if I die real fast, otherwise you keep your hands off.
Exactly.
Conditional.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask about the timing. So it sounds like the first 8 phases go by very quickly, like within moments. And then,
the 8 stages.
Then there's like a period of days before you enter in the Bardo. Is that just about the timing?
Yeah, because apparently you pass out in the clear light for a while. But you don't experience it as clear light, the ordinary person. If they are not instructed to identify with that, they just
So is there
feel
like a
unconscious.
5 day, four
What?
and a half day, 5 day period?
Yeah, they say 4.5 days clear
But
light.
some masters
But
that,
you know,
that die
yeah.
in tukdam, some masters, they'll die in meditation state, and they'll maintain that for many days.
Oh, weeks.
Yeah,
Weeks.
and they'll
Months.
stay in the clear light, and then the corpse will kind of drop over.
So when, when Galen's grandmother passed away, we were reading some of the book, and we thought, well, maybe we should read it, you know, so in case she could hear us,
yes,
you know.
that's very
so
good.
I was just wondering if that happens, can we actually read and follow her over time? But we don't know.
Well,
we
you
were just
won't
guessing
know
4.5
unless you're a
days.
psychic. You know, if you call Laura Jackson and the Jackson can come help you. And unless you have those, actually, we all have those abilities, actually, but they're not open in all those of us. They're automatic byproducts of a certain degree of meditative expertise, actually. And everyone has those abilities. The brain is so amazing, and the thing that creates the brain, which is the karmic seed of the person, you know, the third gene, what I call the third gene, the spiritual gene that comes from your previous life. It's amazing. So, or you wouldn't be the amazing you that you are. And so, so you don't know. But for the bereaved to feel they're communicating to the one who's gone and giving them instruction and don't do this, don't go with that light, it's really great for them. And so they might be picking up, because that's what I was trying to read. The minute you're in the Bardo, you're 9 times more intelligent than you were, because you have your whole brain. You don't have all that congealed, you know, Haagen-Dazs ice cream in there that is ruining or creating, you know, like Alzheimer's or whatever, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And so you're 9 times more intelligent, so you can read people's minds and you can understand things that you might have resisted or not understood before you died. So I think it's very valuable to read to people, and that's why I tried to make this in a little more readable way. But it's still, when you translate Tibetan things that are given concepts by them, it becomes like, you know, your natural, void, clear, all that. These are all monosyllabic words in Tibetan. And they go by very easily, and they flip off their tongue because it's such a sophisticated cultural language. It really is an amazing Dharma culture. Tibet is nothing like on the planet. Truly the creation of Avalokiteshvara, out of compassion. The Dalai Lama is saying that Tibetan culture could be of benefit to many people beyond Tibetans. It's very precious, must be kept, etc. Why he asked us to make Tibet house, you know. And this is really true. It is the most incredible language. They're amazing. So it sounds like a little heavy, but someone 9 times more intelligent, they're going to get it. So read Up a Storm. And even on the year after, read it. You never know. And they might have died again, or whatever, what they're doing, you never know.
Baba, Menpa Tashila wanted to say something.
Oh, yes, Gela.
Hello?
Yeah, that's good. All right.
I think the most important here, the one piece I think is missing is recognize that you completely date. We talk about accident to date and nature date, accident to date, nature date. But the recognize 100% date is very important. If people accidentally date, maybe not completely date. So we recognize the date here in a Western medical point of view, and we recognize completely date and Tibetan view. It's a little bit different. Because anytime the Tibetan people recognize the date, there's a certain signs show after there's no heart beating, there's no breathing, but the corpse still warm, stay there. That time, that person is not the completely dead. Now, often the accident people happen this way too. I mean, it's accident people still have some kind of consciousness left off there. So this is something that a little different I want to add.
Okay, thank you. There wasn't a question there, a comment, right?
No, yeah. Did you heard what he said?
But no, I couldn't quite make it out, I have to say.
He said that it's important to recognize also that the modern definition of death, like brain death, is different than in Tibetan view.
Oh, right.
That actually sometimes when the body is still warm, it's not completely dead.
Yes,
you know, where maybe it's the process, this the white and the red are still joining together.
That's right.
This process is, also very important. Yeah.
Right, of course. You are absolutely right.
The Bardo is a start.
I'm sorry. My hearing is so strange.
Bardo is a start after some kind of 100% date.
Yeah.
Before 100% date, Bardo is not start yet.
Right.
So the biggest sign, the clearest sign of the date is anywhere there's some kind of a liquid come up in front of the body. That means that person's dead. And that's sometime that's some liquid come up from the body. That time the person is completely dead, and also that time is corpse is very cold also.
Liquid coming out of the
Any
orifices or the top of the head or
So then,
guys.
Then the prod will start, and then, like you said, intelligence is different.
Okay, guys. So it is 9:30, and thank you. And I have to apologize.
This video was brought to you in part through the generous support of the Tibet House US membership community and viewers like you. To learn more about the benefits of Tibet House membership, including special Dosset tours with Robert Thurman and friends with geographic expeditions, please visit bobthurman.com. Tashi Delek, and thanks for watching.